Hey everybody, Rob Orgel, your favorite silencer nutjob. In today's video, I wanted to talk about 5 things that I wish I knew about silencers. Now, I made a video like this about a year ago, and in that year, I had about 40 silencers at that time. Now I've got about 170 something, maybe 180 silencers. So these lessons are lessons learned since the first video I made about 5 things I wish I had known. So without beating around the bush, make sure you give me a like, comment, subscribe. The algorithm in YouTube doesn't like silencers or firearms, so I really appreciate the support you guys have given me thus far. It really does mean a lot. Also, I would love to hear in the comment section one of the things that you've learned about silencers or something you're looking to learn about silencers so I can help come up with more ideas in the future. A lot of my ideas come from the comments section, so I really appreciate your guys' thoughts. Number 5, and work our way down to number 1. Number 5, silencers are not hearing safe. Now, you could argue with me that on certain 22s, on certain 9mm, or on bolt-action rifles, you can get away with a lot more abuse. However, I have hearing loss and tinnitus. Now, I did spend 10 years in the military and 4 years as a private military contractor. That equates to a lot of hearing loss as being an infantryman and a firearms instructor. However, since then, I've lost a lot more hearing being on ranges with an AR-15 and having my suppressor on the end and saying, well, it's not that bad. And for 1 or 2 rounds, that's true. For a coyote hunter otherwise, sure. But when you're training all day long, definitely wear hearing protection, even if it's an all-day thing. If it's a coyote hunt, I get it. But if it's a really good spot and you've got 5 dogs coming in per stand or a prairie dog spot, I would say bring hearing protection with you. 5 is wear hearing protection, even if you run a silencer, unless it's a very rare / occasional shot. And more ideally on the bolt action 22s, 9mm, you can get away with a little bit more than on the 5.56 semi-auto and 308 semi-auto stuff. So keep that in mind. Hearing protection, good idea. Number 4, 3D printing is the way. Now, I've spoken to a lot of manufacturers in the 2 years I've been doing this channel. I've been humbled and grateful to share some thoughts and experiences off of what I've learned from the lessons behind me, all the different tests that I've been experimenting with, and before all of this, being an instructor in the military and seeing lots of evolution in training and weaponry. Well, what I can say is, as we're evolving, there are those who evolve and those who refuse to evolve. And if you say, look, I've got a standard baffled suppressor, I love my suppressor, that's fine, but the likelihood that it's low back pressure is kind of low. The likelihood that it sounds really good is kind of low. Now, there are some that still stand out amongst the modern suppressors, but the truth is, we used to say you could have low back pressure, 3D printed, or you can have quiet. And that used to be true. That, however, is no longer true. My 2 quietest suppressors to date are both 3D printed, and they are both, in fact, low back pressure suppressors. So you can have your cake and you can eat it too. We're in a new world of science and technology, and the additive designs that we're able to do now are way surpassing anything we used to be able to do. So highly recommend in your future purchases, as you're looking at suppressors, if it's not 3D printed, chances are it's not going to be around in 3 more years. In fact, the only reason some of these silencers are around is because my buddy has one and he told me it's the best one. There's a lot of good resources out there. 30-06 was a great caliber. Some guys are still rocking it. But if you're going to the store to buy a rifle and Grandpa used a 30-06, it might not be that 30-06 is the right caliber for you. It might be that 6.5 Creedmoor or 308 or insert caliber here, 6 Creedmoor. I mean, like, there's a lot of great options today that are new and have superseded the past. So if you have a 30-06 and you're hunting, rock on. If you're at the gun store to buy your first hunting rifle, 30-06 probably isn't the best choice. We've evolved. So it's analogous to the suppressors in the world we're living in today, that if you're doing a standard baffle stack, your chances are very high back pressure, it's sounding okay, but the 3D printed are typically lighter, lower in back pressure, and even sound a whole bunch better. So number 4 is you can now have low back pressure and amazing sounding suppressors. 3D printed, it's the way. Number 3, effects on the host. Now, we might be talking about back pressure, but that's one of a few things. I've been testing back pressure in a lot of fun ways, and that'll bring me to another point later. But what I have found is if you're shooting 1 round and measuring back pressure, you'll find that your host behaves a little bit different, meaning your AR-15 will behave a bit different. If you're on a bolt gun, you might notice a point of impact shift. If you're on a semi-automatic, you might not be testing it for the level of accuracy you would a bolt gun. There typically is a point of impact shift. Often it's not as noticeable because guys running AR-15s are shooting steel targets and all that stuff. They're rarely shooting paper at distance. When they are, they too will notice point of impact shift. However, there's some additional feedback happening inside of that weapon, and that is the suppressor is acting like a muffler on a car, and it's pushing pressure rearward, and that's gases and carbon. So not only is the operating system of the human taking this in, short-term gases in the eyes, nose, long-term negative health effects, but the short-term is you might tear up and have to stop shooting. The long-term is you might get diagnosed with some other things down the road that I dare not talk about on YouTube. Next is the effects on the host weapon, not just the human. The human experience is an important thing, and we don't really have a good way to quantify the volume of silencers. That's for another video, and that's also why I don't use decibel readers. But another story here nor there. For now, let's now talk about the weapon system. When you add this muffler to the end of your gun, you're changing the gas within that gun. So the barrel has a hole drilled in the top of it for a port size to bleed gases up into the block and then rearward through the tube and then unlock that operating system. However, when you increase those gases by a bunch, you'll see that the bolt starts cycling faster. You'll find the brass starts ejecting forward. And then you'll find that your gun gums up with carbon a whole lot faster than it would without a suppressor. So it must be that silencers make the gun dirty. High back pressure suppressors do make the gun dirty. Low back pressure suppressors will give you very similar effects to no suppressor at all as far as it pertains to the human operating system and the weapon operating system. So it's a very good idea to consider having those low back pressure systems or to mitigate gas back pressure. I will make a video in the future about back pressure and its mitigation. There are several good techniques that exist if you happen to have one of the older style suppressors. If you're on some of these newer style 3D printed suppressors, most of the time you don't need any mitigation for back pressure. You just screw that thing on the end of your weapon and start rocking. So number 3 is effects the suppressor creates on the operating system of the weapon and the operating system of the human. Number 2, updates. This is kind of back to a point we spoke about a moment ago, and that is we're evolving so darn fast. The gun industry likes doing a thing called SHOT Show. Every year in January, all the who's of who's come to Las Vegas, and they show and display their new toys. This is more of a media event than a tourist event, and guys like me go out there and say, what's the new silencer? How will we make it different? Is it lighter, quieter, lower back pressure? All the questions I love answering or asking, and then hearing what the manufacturer has done to improve their previous design. Now, SHOT Show is once a year, and silencers are evolving so darn fast that I have literally made a video about the K-off, all of my 5.56 suppressors on different rifles, and which one performs the best, and then here is the result. And 1 week later, somebody says, well, what about this new guy? And I compared it, and the old winner is not the winner anymore. And then another company sent one in just a week later, and then when we compared him, he fell. So like every week, sometimes every month, there is a new king in town, and it is amazing how fast silencers are evolving, and that the young guy who's new to making silencers pops in and makes one of the old guys who's been doing this for 20 years look goofy because he's come up with a new concept and design. Because 3D printing allows him to submit his design, have it printed and sent to him, the cost of entry is now much lower. Therefore, it's become much more of a free market for anyone to get involved who's got a little bit of engineering sense and wants to play. So we're evolving so fast, and all of these little updates, when I make a Rob's Top 5 rifle suppressor video, a month, 2 months, 3 months later, it's time for me to make another one. And people will say, well, what about, you told me I bought because you said, at that time, that was the best. And for example, the last 3 weeks, the guy who's king of the hill gets knocked over by the next guy, and so on. It's very impressive how fast we're evolving. What does that mean for you? It doesn't mean you need to buy a new silencer every week. The differences are so small. And again, back to the 30-06 example, don't let grandpa convince you to buy a 30-06 because it was the best of his time. It served in 2 world wars. I get that. World War I, World War II. Great cartridge. However, that was a long time ago. We've evolved quite a bit, and 30-06 probably isn't the best cartridge. So like that, when your buddy says, hey, check out my blah, that might be the best this month. But in 6 more months, there might be something better. Now, also keep that in mind with your purchasing power. Look at titanium and Inconel. Inconel is a more long-term, great longevity, pass it on to the grandkids or something, right? But at the rate at which we're evolving, it's analogous to saying, I'm going to hand off my iPhone 17 to my grandchild. They're going to have, I don't know, glasses or something fancy. They're going to have teleporting stuff. They're not going to care about your iPhone, just like you don't care about your Nokia from high school. So the point is, don't be so wrapped up in it being a long-term investment. See it as this is the best suppressor today, but in 3 years, 5 years, definitely 10 years, it's going to be antiquated. So The updates is more of a quarterly thing these days. So I would check in on some of your favorite YouTubers so that before you go buy your next suppressor, you check out some of the new stuff. It's not the AR-15 that's been around for 45 years. We're making leaps and bounds on suppressors. So pay attention to the updates before you buy your next suppressor. Number 1, the most important one, as always to me, back pressure. A lot of us are chasing that sound reduction, and I'm with you. I want my silencer as quiet as possible, just like the next guy. However, I'm doing a lot of experimentation and finding what suppressors have how much back pressure. And that back pressure is all that extra gas coming rearward in that operating system like we talked about earlier on the weapon and the human. Those aren't good for the weapon, long-term or short-term. Those aren't good for the human, long-term or short-term. So I've found a way to measure back pressure within a rifle speed adjustable gas system. This allows me to seek last round hold open and choke down the gas so that as I add the suppressor and continue choking gas down, I can find out how much gas the suppressor is increasing once attached. Now, having said that, there's many other ways to mitigate back pressure, but there's also many other tests. And some of the tests that I found recently is doing high rate of fire engagements, like a non-standard response, 5 rounds to the upper torso area. When doing that engagement, most suppressors would tear me up with gases when I would do that. In an indoor environment, it's very bad. You'll choke up too. It's not a good situation. So finding suppressors that reduce that gas during the high string of fire. In other words, the first round eats up a lot of gas inside that suppressor. This is one of many phenomena called first round pop. There's a few other things taking place in that silencer as the oxygen is eaten up inside that suppressor. And on the second, third, fourth round, the gases are changing and the operator might receive more gas back pressure. So in some of the tests that I've done recently, check out the King of High Rate of Fire exercise. That's where I compared a Knight's Armament suppressor who does an excellent job at that high string of fire, and I compared it to several other silencers in class, and I found 4 of the best silencers that are great for high string of fire or high rate of fire training. Also, there's back pressure mitigation tools that can help you with this, but organically, there are silencers that can come right out of the box, go right on the end of your gun, and have very low back pressure and sound great. So the eras of before, where we had to have a rotary phone and a handpiece and a mouthpiece, those days are over. We've got cell phones in our pocket. The only reason they exist is because people go to the store and they don't know that there's newer, better technology, so they perpetuate some technology of the past. Guys, if you like this content, please feel free to stick around, check out some of our other content. You'll find I'm giving out a lot of free information about silencers, and I'm testing a lot head-to-head. And what I have learned in this 1-year journey has been exponential. And I thank you all for supporting this channel, throwing those comments, and helping this channel grow, because it's gained me access to a lot more information, and I love sharing it with you guys. As always, stay safe, and we'll see you in the comments.